So, Paul, if anyone's listening, we need a new intro for Paul. Paul needs to be added into our little cheesy intro. So, Mike in Space, if you're listening, or if anyone else, please help us be a little bit better.
Paul Sports.
Paul, yeah. Make sure to call him Paul Sports for sure. All right. Until then, we have the normal intro.
Michael Tidwell and Michael B. Casey.
Blocktime.
It's Blocktime. This is Michael Tidwell.
And this is Michael B. Casey.
And again, we are joined by co-host Paul Sports. How are you doing today, Paul?
I'm doing great. Thanks, guys.
So,
Thanks for having me.
Recent announcement. I didn't know if you wanted to break the news here to all your fans, but you actually were traded. And it sounds like you're okay with it. You were traded to the Dash Amanda Bees over the weekend?
Yes, that definitely did happen. I was informed. Vitalik, the coach of the Ethereum Elephants, he called me up and he said, we need to have you come into the office, for a meeting. And they sat me down and they told me that I had just been traded, to the
Oh man,
to the Bees.
How did that conversation go? Like, were you upset? Like,
well, it was a pretty rough conversation. Well, he talked a lot about 12-dimensional hypercubes, which is a little distracting. But I'm just excited to try and do the best that I can for my new team, and we're going to try to make it all the way to the playoffs or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, the BCL, the Blockchain Crypto League, is still a fairly new league. I mean, a lot of people are looking for good quarterbacks, and I know you're good at a plethora of sports. I know you're not sure which sport you're going to be playing that week, but what I mean,
yes, I'm not.
So I haven't really been keeping track. Who's your opponent for next week? Do you know?
No, I don't know.
I think. I'm looking at the roster right now. You're going up against the Zcash Zoocox.
It could be anyone.
You're going up against the Zcash Zoocox. So let me for the people who are watching for the people watching.
Yes.
We have, let's see here. If you see Dash Amanda Bees, they're up against the Zcash Zoocox. The Much Doge Very team is going up against the Bitcoin Honey Badgers. Ethereum Elephants, your old team. I don't know, who did they use to replace you as for their quarterback position?
I have been replaced by...
I think it's Andreas, right?
It was Bram Cohen.
Bram Cohen is
the quarterback.
So the Ethereum Elephants, your old team is playing against the Pepe Cash alt-right. The Monero Mooners are up against the Litecoin Reading Lights.
Without my help.
Interesting. Yeah, so make sure to place your bets.
Yes, well, I'm very...
We have a large pie. I think we're up to $150 million for this round one.
150 million Doge.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. There you go. So a lot of
about
binary.
About $3.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are they paying you? Are they paying you in Dash now? Or how is your team paying you?
My contract. No, no one is allowed to get paid anything. There's very strict. We have the highest ethical standards in this league, and no one is allowed to be paid anything. So you just do what people tell you to do, and that's how the league works because that's how everything works. So no one is paid at all.
Well, I thank you for taking time out of your busy workout sessions and such and training to come here and talk about the week's news in cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. Let's see. We have a couple talking points. I did want to mention. I know you weren't too keen on this, but the proof of stake snippet. So I started making snippets of our last episode, and it seems to be cool. People like it. The one guy said, obviously, he solved a proof of stake with that proof of skill stuff, and I actually had to go back to Chris DeRosa's interview when we're in Miami about that.
Who was this? Do you remember his name?
I don't care who actually posted that comment, but I did go and when you Google proof of stake or proof of skill algorithm, the first thing that comes up is Chris DeRosa's interview with the guy who's like making it, and I was like, I couldn't believe that it's actually based off like fantasy points and like stuff, and I was like,
I've never actually seen that.
Yes.
I'm unfamiliar.
Anyways, I just want to make a quick mention.
Can somebody? What is proof of skill for the uninitiated?
To me, it just sounded so ridiculous. I didn't even like, but I mean, the guy is serious. The guy's serious about it. It's not like a joke. He wrote a white paper or something. I mean, he's like really serious about it.
Yes. So it's a little bizarre. Basically, he uses as a source of randomness the fantasy football outcomes for the previous, or the fantasy whatever outcomes for like of the previous week or something. But I think they're like as input by him or something, which is the.
That sounds like it could be gamed anyway.
It's quite funny. I don't know. Like, it's funny because we've gone very far away from the original Cypherpunk.
Cypherpunk ICOs.
Certainly
That's where we are now. Cypherpunk ICOs.
Or though, that's what it is. And what's something like that? That's not like, I know I could glean from it.
Interesting.
So someone actually donated to us to our multi-sig address for the podcast.
Was it enough to spend, or is it all going to be eaten by transaction fees?
So this is 0.002 Bitcoin. Someone actually donated. We have one transaction. Yeah. So whoever did that, thank you.
Thank you very much. That's awesome.
It's like $5, I think.
Yeah.
Or something. So they, I remember we said that was going straight towards nonprofit sports league, keeping Paul Sports on the field. Let's see what else we got going on. So that Alphabay stuff just kind of broke out of nowhere. What happened with Alphabay, Paul? Did you really look into that?
Well, it's very terrible. You're asking me?
I mean, did you
I
really
read a little bit about it.
I read into it. It's like the founder like killed himself. He hung himself in a cell or something.
One guy hung himself in the cell in Thailand, but it was a 3-country raid from what I read. 3 countries, I think Thailand, Canada, I forget where else. But the police raided them, and they apparently took down Alphabay for good. And it wasn't an exit scam from what I hear. They just they linchpinned them, so they probably got all the Bitcoin. I mean, if they managed to seize it, all the Bitcoin of Monero that would have been on Alphabay, which, and one guy hung himself in jail. I don't know if he was the ringleader, but he definitely didn't like his prospects.
Well, yeah. Paul, did you have anything to add to that? I don't know if you...
Well, the interesting thing is that there are already competitors and that it just diverted the demand to them, and one had to stop.
I wonder who the big king is now.
Stop allowing signups.
Do you know who now would be the number one darknet market?
From what I heard, I don't know. No, I don't know. But I heard that there's one is like Dream or something, and the other one is like starts with a K. I don't really know.
All right, so 3 topics I want to talk about personally. Three topics I want to talk about personally was I want to talk about Wayne's ICO.
This is Wayne Vaughn.
Wayne Chain,
yes.
TNT.
The Wayne Chain ICO.
The Wayne Chain ICO.
The Wayne Chain ICO.
I want to talk about I want to talk about this idea that they think they've kind of captured this Moby whale over the last 18 months, and they found a pattern with spamming. And then I want to talk about just general Segwit 2x stuff, and pretty much I want to kind of focus this next topic at you, Paul, with I know Jeff Garzik is getting so much hate right now, and I know that you work for Block with Jeff Garzik. I want to know how what your thoughts are on this. So maybe we can just briefly talk about what you can talk about. And those are the things I want to talk about. Paul, I know you've been really busy. You've been doing. I mean, CoinDesk just wrote an article about you. You want to give us a little bit about what you've been doing? I know you're kind of limited on time today.
Yes, on Monday I published an update to the scalability roadmap to the Bitcoin Dev mailing list. But then something really weird happened because the update was to Greg Maxwell's original roadmap, which, as you probably know, ended up being signed by a lot of people, and it was hosted on, Bitcoin, I think bitcoincore.com and bitcoin.org, or they were redirecting to each other or something. The destination was, but it ended up being this kind of community statement on the behalf of what you might call Bitcoin Core, or what you might also call like the technical community. And what Greg said is that he actually regretted, he said something, he kind of threw a little curveball, and he said that he regretted that the original roadmap had ever been written by him, and he regretted that people signed it, which is weird because it's been signed by basically everyone, Adam Beck, Peter Todd, Peter Willa.
So for everybody's reference, the scaling roadmap, what did it say, in fact? Like, what was it, the original? What alterations did you make to it to update?
Okay, so the original was just a big list of where we kind of were with scaling technology and where it was probably going over the immediate kind of foreseeable future. So like, here's what we should do, here's what we should do, here's what we should do. And then here is like where we might go after that. And then like, we may still need to hard fork to a higher size, respecting Segwit's rescaling. So that's what it was. But it was from December 2015. So it's very old, early December 2015, in fact, like December 6th or something. So it was very old. And in fact, parts of it were not even correct. And more than half of it we had already completed because, a year and a half has gone by. 17 or 18 months has gone by. So what I did is I just took out all the stuff that had been, moved all the other stuff up and added new things and re-emphasized things like Lightning Network and things like Schnorr, signature aggregation. And I tried to kind of put more specific like numbers on it because I wanted it to be like a useful communication device. And so that's what I did before putting it out. And I did circulate it a little bit among people to see if the dates and the numbers made sense. And then people contacted me even after I published it on Monday to say maybe this value should be here or this value should be there. But even though the discussion had kind of started, then Greg moved in and said that there shouldn't be a roadmap at all. So I'm not sure what, some people still after that feel, I may try to rephrase it as sort of just like a, forecast of.
Well, why wouldn't we have a roadmap for? Okay, it's not an agreement, right? But it's just like a loose framework, right? So it's not like everybody has agreed to it, people did sign it, but
we should probably ask him.
Yeah.
But from what I gathered, is that there was like this kerfuffle about whether or not like Segwit had like a deadline that had been missed, and so I think he just doesn't want to make any promises that can't be kept. I really think that's kind of
Segwit
really sure
to deploy the code base took them a lot longer than they initially anticipated, but it got done eventually, right? It's I don't know, to me roadmaps are not definitive timeline documents. They're literally, okay, this is the direction we're going. This is what we want to do. I don't know. Maybe that wasn't the intent.
I think that anyone who has even the smallest experience with software knows that all the deadlines are always missed. So it's like, I don't think ever a software project has ever been finished on time.
Yeah, well, maybe it shouldn't have definitive dates in there or anything like that. Just, very rough. Yeah.
We need. Who's the project manager?
There is a good argument about there's an argument from like Nassim Taleb about whether or not it's better to have a bad map or no map at all. And that's a legitimate argument. Like, sometimes it's better to have no map at all instead of a map that's just sort of inaccurate. But in general, people prefer a map that's like, some sort of blurry.
You have to have something people can either agree with or disagree with. You have to have some sort of stated plan, right? It may not be the absolute plan, but you have to start somewhere. If you have no map, you just sit there and you have to rehash the same argument over and over and over and over again versus, saying this is what we want to do. It's like a position statement, right?
I think if people who work in like a corporate setting, they need it would benefit them to have some kind of plan. And it also benefits them to have like a clear kind of scapegoat or something. So like if they get called in by the board or whoever it is, and someone says, why isn't, we were supposed to grow by whatever percent this quarter or this year, that's your job to get the growth up. Like, why isn't it growing? people would be able to say something like, well, we're constrained by this other bottleneck. So let me show you what it is. Here it is. It's this roadmap. They say they're not going to be finished. They're doing this, then this, then this, then this. And if we want any of that stuff to be finished faster, we're going to spend money on it ourselves.
Is this a Bitcoin
so it's
Core
nice to have
document?
A scapegoat. If instead they just have to go in and say, like we can't because Bitcoin Core is like something vague about like they're not really they're not being very helpful on scaling front. Then it kind of looks like they're just waffling on the issue or evading their responsibilities. But if they have some tangible thing and say like, look, this is the plan. The technical community feels this way. We feel different. Even if they disagree, it's more helpful because if the conversation currently has no progress, it's just lots and lots of different people, and they each have their own nuanced opinion. And so it'd be easier if you could just cut people into little groups and say, okay, here are these groups, and here's a little summary of what they think, and here's what we'd have to change if we wanted that to be different.
I think doesn't Luke Dash Jr. kind of try to do some stuff like that, especially with like the different people who want Segwit and all this other stuff? You know what I'm talking about?
Luke's a very interesting guy for sure. I mean, I don't know what his opinion on. I mean, I did show a draft to him and some other people, and he didn't seem to think anything about it was weird or objectionable. I mean, lots of people. What's weird for me is that a lot of people did sign Greg Maxwell's original roadmap, but now he's sort of saying that what all those people did, myself included, by signing it, they misrepresented the views of the author, which is, I don't know, that is what it is.
So is this like a Bitcoin Core document, or what does it fall under? I mean, like, you said it was hosted on what, Bitcoin.com or
yeah, it was very
Bitcoin.org rather.
I was seen as very authoritative, in my opinion. I mean, I think if you go to, it's on both, but I think if you go to the one on Bitcoin.org, it will redirect you. So if you just search like Bitcoin Core Scaling Roadmap. So
it's a core document. So it's part of
I
Bitcoin
think so.
Core.
I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, if Maxwell made it, it probably is.
There's a little bit of a shell game here where like people say there's a consensus that XYZ is believed, but then if someone says anything about Core, they say, well, no one can speak for Core.
Core's a bit like anonymous that way.
Yeah. So right. So it's kind of like there's kind of like a bit of a having it both ways, where there's a unified scientific consensus, but then it's, it can't be described. No one can be ascribed to it. So it's very amorphous in that way.
So what is the current document is, you just updated a couple of dates and stuff. It's still Lightning Network, Schnorr, and on-chain scaling via block size increase, and now, of course, drivechains, right?
Yes, I added my own idea, but I admitted that in the email. I said, well, I'm campaigning my own idea into this, and I'm also campaigning. I drew a distinction between capacity, which I think is what people really care about, which is the transactions per second, and scalability, which is processing each transaction with fewer resources.
Yeah.
So
it's an important distinction. Yeah, very important distinction. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So that's what I thought, and that's what I did. I don't know. So, like, I'm not sure what the fate of that. I'm going to have to definitely, like, retitle that and sort of say it's just like a friendly forecast. And I'll probably have to say, like, in sort of the first sentence or something, that no one is committing to any of these dates or anything. This is just consensus of experts on what is kind of currently being played around with, but
yeah,
I don't really know. I mean, I thought that's already what the
roadmap was, I don't see how any reasonable person could take a roadmap as a commitment. It's just not. That's not what that is. But whatever. But no, very interesting.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, it is interesting. I don't really have the most experience in managing large software projects, so I don't know if maybe there is something about the word roadmap that implies that it is.
No, that would be like a project timeline or something like that or. Yeah, I mean, roadmap is usually very broad.
When you do make a roadmap like that, are you kind of assuming position of project manager, or is that more like who is the project manager of Bitcoin?
Well, I think when you by writing something like that, I obviously was asserting a kind of authority of a kind. But I thought I just kind of wrote. I mean, I tried to take all the dates from other people's everyone's, or I had, there are a lot of like links and sort of citations in there. So like when I talk about the Lightning Network, I point out that we already made a Lightning transaction over Litecoin, and the networks are interoperable. So I'm like, like Lightning Network is usable in some sense. Of course, there's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah, routing,
which I have to clarify. But the Lightning Network is going to be a big project. But like, like it's not like it's just a theoretical idea. We have it. It's on Litecoin right now.
Would you call?
So there's that.
Well, no, I was really wondering, like, would you call like Greg Maxwell the project? Because I know he doesn't really write a lot of code. He mainly reviews code. Is he mainly the technical project manager of Bitcoin, or who at like Blockstream, or who within Core is like really kind of leading that roadmap, or like going along and making sure some of those things get done? Is that Adam Back? Who is it?
Well, I don't know. I would think it would be, if it would be anyone, it would be Adam Back, because Adam Back tries to like stay really well informed of what everyone is doing. I think he always knows like what everyone's doing. That's like his thing. So I think it would kind of be like him, and I did share it with him as well to try and get some of the dates on some of the Blockstream stuff. And I don't know. But see, in Greg's response, he actually shot down both Luke and Dr. Back, which was, again, kind of weird, where he said that Luke's views are very kind of fringe and that Adam Back doesn't have a lot to do with the Bitcoin project, which I thought was ridiculous, but that's what he... That's how he feels, I guess.
There's a lot of, it's not a cohesive group over there. That's for one, for sure. A lot of differing opinions. Block's that way too, right? I mean, you don't agree with Garzik all the time.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think so. Yeah, well, that's an interesting point. Is like, does it really matter like where anyone works? I think sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, which is kind of funny answer to that question.
Well, at the end of the day, though, you do have a boss, and you are employed, and conceivably the boss could terminate your employment if you step out of bounds.
Speaking of Block and Jeff Garzik, what do you think about all the tons of hate that's been going towards Jeff Garzik recently?
Okay, I think you asked me about
how much of this can you
Jeff
talk
Garzik.
about?
I can't. I'm sure I'll talk about it. I'm complaining about your. I know I'm sitting right next to you in Atlanta, but I'm also complaining about your upstream bandwidth.
Paul, it doesn't. Paul, it doesn't matter. We're right here, buddy.
Where I know we're sitting right next to each other, and I can definitely very clearly hear everything.
So he was asking about the massive amount of hate and trolling that Jeff Garzik is now currently experiencing.
Oh, it's very. Yes, well, the environment is very polarizing. So people who want to like, if you want to like impress some elite person like Greg Maxwell, for example, you have two routes. There's the easy way and the hard way. The hard way is to become like an ultra developer, computer science, and impress him on merit. And the other way is to just insult people who are on the opposing faction, and that goes for Roger Ver, goes for everyone as well. Like
it hits that emotional button, doesn't it? It hits that button.
These people who, sorry,
it hits that emotional button. Whenever you see somebody who agrees with you just tear into somebody who doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, human beings are very political animals.
Yeah.
So that we have a lot of that going on right now. This is, what I predicted, and I predict in. I wrote a post in I think it was July 2015 about how the block size debate was really just about an empirical question on whether Bitcoin would be more valuable with larger blocks or smaller blocks, and you could just solve this with futures markets and everyone could go home. But the problem is that I think it's it's kind of complicated, but I think a lot of people derive a lot of no one really wants to, I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain. Like people have a lot of fun joining little teams, and they want to be the people who are the wise deciders of Bitcoin, and they want the other person to be wrong. And if there were just some simple empirical test that picked the side, kind of ruined the fun. I think a lot of people are enjoying this in a weird way.
You see a lot
but
of
it has nothing to do. It has very little to do with science. It's just like people are just. Both people claim the moral high ground. One thing I will say is that Jeff is getting a lot of flack for acquiring Scry, which used to be Chainalysis, and people are saying that Jeff Garzik wants to have transactions on chain, for like Chainalysis reasons or something. That's, to the best of my knowledge, which is better than most, I assume. That's completely false, because we were only hiring the people from Scry, and they had technology that was like very good at pre-processing data in the blocks. And I'm pretty sure I told this to a few people. I don't want to throw them under the bus right now because I can't remember. But I think some of the people who were criticizing him online, I told this like in person, maybe in May or so. But the point is, Scry just had like great technology for like quickly processing blockchain transactions, and they had just done that kind of, like that kind of work. Like there's lots of different kinds of dev work. There's like stuff that you're really interested in, and then there's like endlessly removing memory leaks and very boring things that. So they had done like stuff like that.
So does Scry do? Do they still in their current? Do they still do any chain analysis, or is it they've pretty much been dismantled for that?
There's no. To the best of my knowledge, Block does no like government, what Chainalysis did, where they were going to sell to the government and have report to the government on who was owning which Bitcoin addresses. Block does not do anything like that at all. So, to the extent they do anything on chain, it's just like kind of what you might call like a weather report, or sort of just stuff like what is happening in the block, stuff that's very similar in quality or in kind to what you get on blockchain.info and other stuff like that.
So, basic analytics like blockchain.info, trade block, all that.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so it's basically like, Blockbot, what is it again?
Scry.
So Blockbot Scry, so it could snarf in the information at a quicker rate, basically with lower overhead. Is basically what it is.
They had some good technology, is my understanding, but it was also they wanted to hire the people, the engineering talent that was there, because as you probably know, it's like almost impossible to hire.
It's a very small pool.
Good engineering, yeah. So I think most of it was just to hire it was like an Acua hire, and I think the technology came along for the ride.
How big is Block now?
The extent of it really. It has nothing to do with.
How many employees are in Block?
Probably like it used to be like, it's probably getting up to like 20, almost 20 people, maybe 18.
And that's including the guys from Scry?
I think that was a yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, did I say you guys can't hear me? I can't hear you. I thought you could hear me perfectly.
Yeah, I think you didn't. I think you missed the question. I said, is that including the guys from Scry?
No, it's just my download sucks too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right.
It's just
that does include them.
Yeah.
18 including them.
So it sounds like Paul, you're very in the middle, rational guy. You don't let Jeff Garzik's Segwit 2x push affect anything that you're doing. Sounds like you have a lot of freedom. Sounds like Block is doesn't push any of its like I don't know, philosophies or agenda. Yeah, it doesn't push their agenda on any of their employees or anything.
Yes, I would definitely say that Jeff does not. Of course, we've had like long email exchanges back and forth, just as I have with lots of people who aren't my boss. But Jeff and I have gone back and forth on whether or not what Segwit 2x is about. I mean, I think really the thing is, I really think that everyone has a position that's more reasonable. I wonder about. Sorry, that was a lot of false starts there. But basically, my position is that, or what I'm coming to understand is, I think that people have been waiting for like the big subversive government attack of Bitcoin, and I think meanwhile it hasn't really even like happened yet or at all, and maybe everyone's distracted by Donald Trump or something. But I think instead it's just like creating a kind of paranoia that's tearing up. I really think every single person's views are very normal and reasonable. I know the people who were doing the emergency extension blocks, which included like Joseph Poon and like the Purse guys, like they were really concerned about a hard fork, the mining, the Chinese miners. So they were trying to just like, a lot of people are just trying to do like what they think is the second best because they think there's some disaster looming. And we could even put UASF maybe in that vein, where I doubt a lot of the people who are pushing UASF actually even want it to activate that way. I think they just want a threat so that it's activated by miners the normal way. And I think that so that, it would make it into Segwit 2x. And
if that was their goal, it was effective, right? I mean, because it looks like we're getting...
If that would have worked, if that was the plan.
It's like a necessary...
It did. We might know. Now is when we'll know, right? Because it's the last difficulty period.
Yeah.
It's like this is it, right? Like we're 2 weeks out from August.
We're getting really, really close. I actually want to talk a little bit about it because I don't think we've talked about it in a while, but it's now Bitcoin ABC, just to make sure, because I know we've talked heavily about UASF and Segwit 2x.
You mean like branding?
No. Bitcoin. Okay, so there's BTC1, which is doing Segwit 2x, but Jihan's hard fork is Bitcoin ABC. So that activates in the scenario where Segwit doesn't pass. So it's very, very unlikely that Segwit is not going to pass. But
what does ABC stand for?
I don't know.
Does it stand for some Chinese
no,
words?
I don't even know. It's just Bitcoin ABC. So we have BTC1. What's the one for? I have no idea.
Well, no, I mean like Jihan probably just was like, oh, the first 3 letters of the American alphabet.
I think that's what it is. I think that's what it is. But I mean, they just gave themselves a name. The names are relevant. The thing is, it's Jihan's fork that's an answer to UASF. It's what the hard fork that will occur if Segwit isn't activated under UASF. So like if for some reason Segwit 2x fails, like if Jihan himself or some of the other miners peel off and decide we're not going to implement Segwit 2x, right? And it doesn't reach the 80% threshold, then UASF, of course, will activate on August 1st.
August 1st, yeah.
And then Bitcoin ABC will
perform
a hard 3rd, I believe.
Okay.
Will perform a hard fork on August 3rd.
Okay.
So that'll be the scenario that goes down there, and that is just going to be a god-awful cluster.
Is he still planning to secretly attack the chain for like 2 weeks and then
undoubtedly? But I mean,
a lot of people are calling that an empty threat. By the way,
what do you mean?
A lot of people are calling that an empty threat in the dojo.
Whoa.
That I want to make a note real quick. We no longer have a coin dojo. It is we temporarily went to ICO dojo and then it went to the token dojo. So we are and we can get into Wayne Chain after this, but sorry, just want to make a note. It's the dojoers that are saying that.
Yeah. Well, what's
smart,
their point?
people.
What's their point though? I mean, like, what's the argument? I mean, because I don't know that I understand what they're saying exactly.
Empty threat, essentially.
Oh, the hard fork.
No,
for Bitcoin
attacking the UASF chain.
So it depends on what
taking a portion of the mining and
it depends on what you define the UASF chain as. I mean, if you're talking about it versus the hard fork, then if the hard fork does garner minority support, then the entire old chain becomes the UASF chain, in which case attacking it would be effective. If you're talking about a scenario where they don't hard fork and instead there's majority mining power on the non-UASF side, then they're right. It doesn't matter because it's a soft fork. It's either going to gain majority hash rate and overtake the other chain, or it's not, one or the other. So in that case, they're correct. But it depends on the circumstance you're talking about. There's a lot of ways this can play out.
Hey, I know Paul today is limited on time. Did we want to jump straight to TNT? Talk about our boy Wayne?
Sure.
Is that okay? Or did you want to make some final notes on that? Comments, Paul?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin ABC, Paul?
Yeah, so that's a really important thing. I mean, I just think that drivechain is better than I like Segwit, and I think lots of people do. I think it's really kind of in hindsight. I think it really shouldn't have been bundled with a block size increase. It should have just been like some weird thing we should have just rescaled it to like 1 megabyte. We should have had the weight limit be the block weight, instead of being 4 megabytes, which it is now, it should have been just kept at 1 megabyte, and maybe all this confusion would have been avoided. But that's hindsight. So I'm pro Segwit, and I just think that drivechain is better than a hard fork to 2 megabytes, especially a fast one that's rushed like this, and especially also even one that takes a long time, because drivechain will just be finished by the time that a slow hard fork. So that's why I work to try and make drivechain happen really soon, a large block sidechain. And that's kind of what I think everyone should really be focusing on, but I guess only a few people agree. I mean, a few people do agree. So that's like, I think I've got like Adam Back and Luke Jr. kind of, and I've got some other people. And I have like Chris Stewart. It's like, so there are like some people who agree, but
well, I mean,
really
yeah. If you're talking about that, if you have Adam Back agreeing and Luke Jr. and also Jeff Garzik, who is your boss and supports you in this endeavor,
Roger Veer,
Jihan Wu, and Roger Veer. I mean, that's everybody. That is everybody. Right. Yeah. I mean, I literally can't think of a constituency it's not covered. So, except maybe Greg Maxwell doesn't like it for some reason.
Just wants it to be finished.
Yeah.
Yeah, Greg Maxwell would be the final ingredient.
Oh, just so what is his opinion on drivechains, so far as you know?
Like, he hasn't shared, but he did when in the course of the back and forth after the roadmap thing on Monday, Tuesday, he did say somewhere that I had addressed that I don't want to misquote him, but he said something like that he wasn't convinced yet, and that I had to respond to some concerns of his, but he didn't explain what those were. And I said, well, hopefully you'll explain what those concerns are.
What about sometime. Peter Todd? Is he on board?
Then he said it was off topic, and then he said it was off topic in that mailing list thread, but he could have obviously have easily have gone back to the different thread where it was on topic and posted them there, as is obvious to everyone. So I'm not sure when he's going to do that, if ever. And I really look forward, because he is the ultimate, I mean, Peter Todd did, I dueled Peter Todd on the mailing list like twice so far. And that was certainly like the height of the challenge.
Yeah, if somebody's going to poke holes, it's going to be Peter Todd.
Basically, for that one conversation with Peter Todd. So that was like a big one. And but then Greg Maxwell is probably the only thing that's comparable to that. And I spent a lot of time researching Peter Todd's complaints in advance so that I would know what they were. But I don't know what Greg is thinking. Although I sneakily suspect that he of part 4 of a presentation I did on sidechain risks, because there's this paper and there's this belief about fees collapsing to zero that I have counter arguments to, and I think that that's one of his, but I don't know what his are because he won't share them, which is very unsportsmanlike, I have to say. As Paul Sports, master of sports, you should really do the honorable thing and say what the objections are. You should not just say that you have some somewhere secretly and that you're just waiting for everyone to. I don't know, like why would he allow?
What I forget. What team was he?
To be such a strong supporter.
What team was Greg? What team was Greg Maxwell playing for again, Paul?
What team was he playing? He's got to be the. What team is he on? He would definitely be the Pepe Cash alt-right. Yes, he's the wide receiver.
Wow, I'm glad his beard doesn't get in the way with that. That's great.
Yeah, that's the only team that can put up with. Everyone on that team is very passionate about football or whatever they're playing and their version of it, and that's the unbridled expression of that team.
So, if Segwit doesn't pass, getting back to Bitcoin ABC for just a second, then that hard fork, it's not going to have Segwit in it, right? It's just going to be a straight 8 megabyte hard fork.
It's literally going to be Roger Veer's wet dream.
Basically, yeah. I mean, I really hope that doesn't happen because we're very close to a compromise now, and I understand your reservations about the 2 megabyte hard fork, but I'd rather make sure we can actually do a hard fork, and that's going to be a conceivable thing going forward. Although the risks they're large, but if Bitcoin can't fork, it's
I just think
dead.
I mean, everyone's not really getting what they want. It's not really a good some people say a good compromise is when everyone is unhappy. I don't know. I just think a good compromise is when everyone is happy. Like I just don't understand so much fight for just a tiny little 2 megabytes. It's so small, and I can give. I have math and Bitcoin Discuss where I can get 20 megabytes with the large block.
Well, let's be fair because with Segwit involved too, it's more like a realistic of like 4, right? Or 3.8 or something like that with the increase
that's with Segwit.
Yeah, with Segwit and the 2x. So I mean, it's enough to tide us over.
With the 2x, it would be Segwit with the 2x. It could be like like
realistically almost 4 or so for average use. But like so that kind of leads us into the next one. I don't know how long you can stick around, but the what was it, the whale?
I mean, we might as well talk about the most important stuff with limited amount of time. So what do you think? To me, we were kind of hinting at this last week, kind of speculating on what might have been the spam, and it seemed like someone feels like they're sure that it was a concerted effort to spam the network versus like maybe people dropping off the network because they got disenfranchised because of high fees. It seems like to me that people have at least done a little bit of analysis and see that there's a clear enough sign where there was some kind of spamming
Did you see that tweet, Paul, where the guy had the charts?
Well, I have no idea. I know that there was a lot of demand for network block space, and it went down kind of mysteriously recently, and things have been quite harmonious over the last 2 weeks or whatever it is. And so I have no idea I haven't checked any of this analysis, and I don't really want to comment on it because I don't know anything about it. But just psychologically, my money would be on Olivier Janssens if it were someone who's rich and crazy enough to a big blocker team and kind of type of person would do it.
Just on first glance, to me, it looks like something fishy was definitely going on.
So the guy that posted it was Laurent MT on Twitter.
Yeah, Laurent MT on Twitter, and
he has a bunch of graphs.
I
have no way to validate if any of these are scientific or not.
I only saw them very briefly today, so I haven't had a chance to look over it. And a couple of people asked him if he was going to write a paper on it and do a full in-depth review. Because if you just see the graphs, it's really hard to show exactly what his point is and exactly how he manipulated to come up with.
I'll share the screen with people watching on.
Let's
see.
I think that's very interesting, though. I agree with you that we have no real way of knowing.
Yeah, we don't. But I mean, stuff like this always intrigues me because there's always telltale markers of something going on. You can reconstruct maybe not who did it, but that somebody did something with enough evidence.
Yeah, well, the weirdest event is that the network congestion has consistently fallen by a large magnitude over the recent past. And why would that happen?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Right? Because
there's no reason for that to happen at all.
Because it's been growing at, with positive first and second derivatives.
So there was something because I was reading a little bit about it, and I don't grok it at all. But he was talking about a pool of UTXOs. And it was something that was done way back in 2015. There were just a ton of transactions splitting it out into UTXOs and doing dust. And then there was something, these transactions were like recombining those, and then they were paying fees and putting in the mempool. But they looked like, based on the way it was done, I guess it looked like it was normal transaction flow versus just one guy doing it. Because if it all came from like one address, it would, it's easy to tell that some guy's spamming it. But, again, jury's definitely out because, but I think it's interesting analysis.
Possible because one thing that would happen, as I say, is the fall in if you compare to manipulation in another world where there was no manipulation. In the world that there was no manipulation, you would need to have some explanation for why the backlog of why the demand for block space has fallen, like in the recent past, over the last month, from what it was previously doing, which was growing by a lot and really bidding up these fees. And that was at a time when people were trying to make a very persuasive case using that fact as evidence. Say, look, the blocks are full, the fees are high. So you'd have to have an alternate explanation if it was not manipulation. If you compare the two worlds, you'd have to say, well, Bitcoin became really unpopular in the summer because people don't use the computer very much. And yeah, I remember Mike Kern saying something like that, like there are seasonal variations in like.
I still don't think that would account for this level of a drop.
But then my point is, you would need something like that.
Yeah, you would have to have something. I read that article.
I can't hear you at all, so I have no idea if I'm interrupting you or not until long after
That's okay.
I've started speaking. But,
so yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying you need some explanation. So, yeah, it would have to be something like that. If you just need some story for why it's going down, but I don't know what that is. It'd have to be a pretty big seasonal effect if that were the story.
Yeah, I'm not convinced a seasonal effect could be a drop of this magnitude.
What's the likelihood that...
Well, maybe it is, though. I don't know.
There's a chance.
Someone should check what the seasonal effect
What's the likelihood that someone, like a big player, some big organization or whatever, was maybe black market or not, was using Bitcoin, and then the fees got too high, and then they found a cheaper solution temporarily, and then they never switched back to Bitcoin when the fees went down? Stuff like that happening. Is that just so low probability? Is that so low probability? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, growth was pushed into altcoins, and then the altcoins had so much extra space that the growth didn't need to return. There's like a fixed cost to switching, and so they switched when they needed to, but now they don't want to switch.
But
back
it seems like to me,
accompanied a sell-off.
Hold on, it seems like to me that's a very unpopular opinion to have.
No, see, to me,
I'm just curious.
It doesn't make sense because it would have accompanied with a sell-off before this. So you would see a sell-off of people who are no longer using Bitcoin. They would sell out of it before they stopped using it. And we didn't see that because the sell-off came after the drop.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I would say what you would really look for is liquidity. Like how much more were they? Because they could have been just using it as a medium of exchange as well. A lot. I mean, they could have.
Might have just been relative. See, then what you could say, the story could be that you would see relatively more interest in altcoins, and that would fit. So, and that would fit like Coinbase, switching to or adding Litecoin, Ethereum, whatever, and Monero and all this other stuff. So, so that kind of could be a story that there's a big fixed cost to switching from Bitcoin to Monero or whatever. And once they switch, because of Bitcoin's fees, they didn't switch back when the fees started coming down on Bitcoin because now they have a new process that they don't want to change.
I mean that's entirely possible, but I mean to me these things usually, if it's something like that, they reach a homeostasis. So it's like, well, fees go high, and then less people use it, and then they drop, and then people start using it again because it's cheaper now, and so it bounces up and levels, and really we've just seen like just a ridiculous, just straight up drop. So I don't know, it's really hard to tell.
The magnitude of the drop is very significant.
I think that there likely, in my opinion, was spamming going on. I mean.
It's hard to know. I wonder who would be the people that would really know these exchanges and people like Eric Voorhees, or who really knows these? Who knows how to answer these questions?
I want to read this guy's research. I want to read this guy's research because it sounded like he was on to something with what he was saying. But
I guess like chain analysis might have some info into that.
See, this
that's quite ironic. I mean, what I was thinking was it would be nice to get the guy on. You could contact the guy who did the research, and I would like to know, like, if he has responses to like other. I mean, again, I haven't even read it at all, so I feel bad even talking about it. But I think, like, has he considered like the seasonal argument effect? Has he considered like a fall in the demand for Bitcoin's block space as a result of Coinbase and these other places switching to having
so what he did, because he didn't even do much of a write-up, he plotted a bunch of transactional information on graphs with how long ago the coins have been sitting, and that was the analysis he did, and he saw a linear progression of coins that were moved out at one specific point in time. They were that set of UTXOs was growing in movement with a linear progression as time went by. So what he's theorizing is somebody was deliberating because they put out a massive blanket transaction. Like they did a bit of a spam, the old 2015 spam attacks. Remember those? Well, that was the seed, and it created a bunch of UTXOs that now feed into what it was the long-term spam attack. That's his theory. And he doesn't comment on the seasonal factor or anything. He's just purely looking at those UTXOs. Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting. It's very interesting.
Well, no, I think that's fine. But I mean, like, you could change the plot so that it was always from. It's like goes from March to, you could change it so that it starts on March 1st every single time, every single year, and then it's renormalized to an index of 100 every March 1st, and then you could plot for different years. You could plot some variable or something, and you could say whatever it was. Then you'd look at it and you'd see, like, right in the middle of the graph would be the summer. And at the end of the graph would be February, the winter. And so you'd be able to just see for each year whether or not this is something that happens every year or that this is something that only happened when people wanted political clout.
Yeah. Part of this, the problem is a lack of data in general because, I mean, the data that's around. Data. Well, yeah, there's blockchain data, but I mean, it's such a different environment this year than it was 3 years ago. You know what I mean? So there could be seasonal effects that are just now becoming apparent that have never been a thing before. It's really hard to tell. Of course, yes. Yeah. I mean, it's so early still.
All right. Well, great talk on that. I guess we'll see where it goes. If it stays low, if it goes high again, we'll see.
Must have been expensive if somebody was doing it. That's all I know.
We have a question on the YouTube channel. Honkin' Poser says, if we assume it was all spam, can we quantify how much that spam attack would have cost daily and in total? And I would say,
we definitely should be able to. Yeah,
I would say you'd be able to calculate.
Low, it probably was spam.
I'd be able to say you'd be able to calculate past how much it costs, but it's hard to probably project how much it would cost because of. The more you spam, the higher it would be.
You could look at the past. Exactly how many bitcoins were paid in transaction fees and multiply that by each of those times, and then add all that together.
Yeah, you could definitely look back in history and figure that out. Yeah.
So that would be interesting. So if it didn't really cost that much, I would say it probably was a spam attack. But if it cost a ton, then I would say maybe not.
Well, what's a ton to you? I mean, it's relative.
Well, yeah, you like you said, Olivia, Roger, they have tons.
I would say if it costs more than $50,000, it's probably
a day.
So I don't know how much it costs.
$50,000 a day?
No, 150 total.
Oh no, dude. I mean, I'm thinking it would. I don't know.
So I think it's probably a mistake to price it in dollars.
He's
probably
sending the money to himself, so it's only the transaction fees.
But it's probably a mistake to price anything in dollars because really what it's about is how much Bitcoin was it. Because the dollar value could go up, go down. If that's your thing, you know what I mean. You're not really concerned with the dollar value. If you've already allocated 10,000 Bitcoin to this effort because you want to push the agenda.
I don't know. I can see it either way.
I don't know.
I think probably.
Especially if you have to restock your Bitcoin.
I don't know either.
I guess, but
no. The whole premise of this theory is that it was set up in advance, 2 years in advance. This was planned out. That's the whole premise of his theory. Is somebody dispersed the UTXO set so they could do this without being detected.
But you don't know if they're recouping their Bitcoin.
You know what's funny? Yeah. You know what happened around the same time? I remember somebody signed up for some stupid reason with extra 20,000 or no, an extra 2,000 accounts on our Bitcoin. Somebody was just spamming accounts and aging them on our Bitcoin for some stupid reason. And that happened about the same time this was seeded.
Well, they wanted to use them later.
Yeah. I mean, I think but that was back in 2015 when that happened. So that's interesting. Maybe that was related. I don't know.
Well, I guess it was just a bunch of users with no posts. That's the only way you know.
Well, no. I mean, it was because it was a bunch of users with no posts, but I mean, it was just the volume of them coming in, and you could see them all were they were randomly generated names. They weren't like
Okay.
they weren't like normal Reddit usernames. They
Like
were
Mike 21.
Yeah, they were.
All right. So all right. Let's talk about TNT, Wayne Chain, the Tyrion token sale. What do you think, Paul? What do you think, Mike?
I haven't read that much about it.
I read the white paper.
Well, I mean,
And I know Paul did because he's an advisor.
Paul's an advisor?
Aren't you an advisor, Paul?
No, for Chain Point,
Yeah.
Wayne and I have talked, and we were at a workshop for a whole day. But that's, so that has nothing to do with the ICO. That long predates the ICO. So I'm not an advisor on the ICO or for his company in general, just for Chain Point, which is very simple.
So what do you think, Paul? Are you gonna?
I don't know.
You buying into TNT?
Sorry. I don't plan on buying any myself, but I don't know what the.
So I have.
Let me give a background.
Yeah, please do.
Let me give a background, and Paul correct me. I said I'm going to give a background, and Paul, you correct me if I'm wrong. Okay.
All right.
All right. So to me, TNT is being used instead of API. So to pretty much say, all right, if I want to be this chain point service provider, I can collect a bunch of people sending me transactions to Tyrion itself, and then I'll collect and make my own Merkle root and my Merkle tree, and then I'll send that up to Tyrion, the big boy. But in order for me to peg all my customers and all my data to Tyrion, I need to pay in this token. So it's an idea that anyone around the world doesn't have to do any kind of fiat processing or whatever. Any company can just use this token instead. And then pretty much just using that instead of paying for like an API program or whatever. But this is also meant to have thought to help with scalability because these people will also kind of, take load off. I mean, to me, they would only be bringing in new customers, so it wouldn't really be like scaling the core, but it would be like bringing in, where you have to essentially pay to use the main core Tyrion, I would call it like the Tyrion chain.
So I don't know. To me, it's always seemed like I always liked the value proposition of Tyrion because it wasn't a tokenized asset, and you could just pay for access to this API.
Yeah, so they still have that. So
it's a separate service.
If I'm a developer, I can still use their open API.
Okay.
But if I want to call their API like 1,000 times per second for like the next year, I have to now become a chain point service provider and start. I don't know. Maybe there's like some like where I can still do like pay like a normal API service. I don't know. Maybe Paul can answer this, or maybe Wayne would have to. But
we should try to get Wayne on here. And,
we
and
should just
ask
interview him.
Yeah,
I
mean, because honestly, I don't know enough about this about the ICO aspect of Tyrion to know exactly.
Well, to me, it was like two main purposes: one, to raise money, and two, to actually have a token that would be used for some kind of utility. That could be used, like, because they actually have a plan that where it actually will have a utility pretty easily to say, like, okay, they're already a company, they already have a service. This token will actually have a value, even though it might not be more efficient than an API call. It might be for someone in a foreign country versus using. It
makes it seem a lot more like Factom now. Because I mean that was always how Factom appeared to me.
No
right?
way, because Factom was trying to do stuff with like a blockchain for like provenance of like land titles and like actually like put the asset on the blockchain. This is literally just using the blockchain as a payment mechanism.
So, okay.
This is all it's using. To me, that's all it's using. This idea of Ethereum tokens or whatever. They'll end up ultimately. I mean, it's right now.
So it's an ERC20 token.
Yeah, and they're pretty much, in my opinion, just using it as this is a permissioned payment
for his Tyrion network.
Yeah, to peg a massive amount of data to the Tyrion ledger. I mean, they have like their own calendar service.
I would like to hear the whole story. We should have Wayne on next week
Paul,
if he can.
Paul, I probably didn't do that justice. What do you have to add to what I just said?
Well, I mean, not really a lot. I mean, the whole thing. The unfortunate thing about the timestamping is awesome, and I think it's a great use case for Bitcoin. The problem with timestamping has always been that it can at most cost one transaction fee to timestamp your data, and that's the upper bound. And then the lower bound is basically as close to zero as you can be because of this Merkle tree, Merkle receipt concept.
Yep.
So it's very difficult to monetize the timestamping because it's so cheap. And, those open timestamps run by notorious perfectionists, let's say Peter Todd. And, I'm pretty sure that that's free, and it might be free for, I don't know, if maybe the business model is they sell support for it, which is very much like a Red Hat type thing. So I don't know.
So that's just an API-based timestamping service?
That's the crux of the matter, is that it's very difficult to monetize something
for the person actually doing the chain point anchoring. If you do that for an entire year to like most of the blocks in the blockchain, it can get kind of expensive. So you'll have like maybe like these third tier, second tier kind of providers that only do anchor like once a day or once a week, where you're not getting like the granularity proof that maybe tiering would provide. I guess maybe that would be the value add.
They put a transaction in every block, do they? Or?
No, they could, because they might have the capital to do that over a smaller or individual.
Well, no, I'm talking about Tyrion now. What's their how often do they commit timestamps?
I don't know. I know it's probably, if it's not every block, it's every other block. I mean, because whenever I use their service, I get a receipt, and it's usually the next block where. So I would say normally, without me knowing too much about Tyrion, is every single block they have a transaction. But I mean, if they miss a block, it's not the end of the world, So because they hit a lot of blocks. All right, so I think we hit most of the talking points. I did want to say, I'm guessing everyone saw that guy on Twitter blew up, or he was at
Bitcoin guy.
Yeah, buy Bitcoin guy. He went. Janet Yellen was talking. He was in the background, had a sign that said buy Bitcoin, and then everyone came up with little memes like with Fluffy Pony and Vitalik. It's so funny. Monero, the Monero one was so funny. Don't buy Monero. So classic.
That was awesome.
Oh, that was the funniest. I laughed so hard.
Monero joke. I fall for it every time.
Yeah, but the funny part is he raised more money than the WannaCry ransomware. I think.
That's hilarious. Yeah. That's so
because
funny.
I checked his. I actually so you know how he had the he wrote out his public address. I actually typed it in character by character into blockchain.info, and he had like 6 point something Bitcoin. And I was monitoring that throughout the week, seeing how like his donations. The WannaCry person only got like 4 Bitcoin, or like 3.9, which was like, oh my god, dude, you raised more money than this like prolific hack.
That's the message. That what you want to do, if you want to hack something, hack the human brain, hack at the brain level. You know what I mean? People are way more vulnerable to that. Hack with a great meme, Don't hack people's computers. They don't care about their computers, really. Only some people do.
What was funny was the part in the speech where he did that. Were you listening to the actual, it was like, well, what do you fear? And then he pulls out the sign and says, buy Bitcoin. That was awesome.
Well, what would be funny is that, it's plausible that the Federal Reserve is...
They planted him,
or has been in the past, talking about like, hey, we might need some Bitcoin.
They planted him
because they have a portfolio of assets that they buy and sell. So they might they may literally be buying Bitcoin, and they may not want anyone to know that they are.
Well, the Federal Reserve or the IMF too. Think about the IMF. Definitely. I mean, they probably should be.
Why wouldn't the IMF?
Yeah.
Oh, you know
exactly.
what?
Perfect.
There's one talking point I want to hit briefly. You know how the main, I would say, talking point of Krista Rose was, we don't need stuff like OpenBazaar or storage because it's like, it's cheaper just to do it centrally, and there's no real need for the decentralized aspect of it. Are you familiar with that, Mike?
Decentralized the wrong thing.
Yeah, so with Alpha Bay maybe being taken down, and BitTorrent and Pirate Bay, having a lot of issues, I mean, is this pretty much saying like, hey, maybe it would be more convenient to always have like this reliable service for stuff like torrents and stuff like an Alpha Bay substitute, so you know it's always there.
You can't really have a centralized Alpha Bay. Well, it is centralized.
No, it is centralized.
It is, yeah.
All like so. Silk Road was centralized. Alphabet was centralized. And essentially, the DeRose argument is you never need to decentralize that because there'll always be people to do it for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the case of Alphabet, it's not just Alphabet. The decentralized aspect is the fact that there's more than one of the darknet markets. So,
well, no, there's more than one torrent. But when's the last time you tried to torrent something? It's like, if your favorite torrent website goes down and you have to find a new one, you have to find a reliable one. It's a pain in the ass.
Well, I mean, it's a market. It's what it is. I mean torrent's a different story because there's no money made. Well, less money.
Well, I mean, I'm saying like the storage could potentially.
Alphabet, they make money.
Yeah, they make a lot of money, so there's a huge profit incentive. So if somebody's always going to pop up to fill the void.
Exactly. That's why I think Chris is much more correct in that sense. It won't matter because it's only been down for Alphabet has only been down for like 2 days, and it had competitors the exact same.
It's whack-a-mole.
Competitors in existence when it went down.
It's whack-a-mole.
Interesting. Okay, I was really wondering if that has changed, but it seems like it's still of the same opinion that decentralizing those kind of things aren't needed.
Well, I mean, how would you decentralize something like that? I mean, like
sovereign name identity, so that they can have just alphabet.bit or whatever, and they don't have to use like weird like Tor and Bitcoin and Tor. They're all like really hard to use because the addresses are foreign to people. The addresses don't make any sense.
So you're saying the darknet market should be a protocol?
No, I'm just saying the names. So I want a name, human readable name, and I want that to map to a bunch of computer understandable
but this
gibberish, which includes like a PGP key, Bitcoin stealth address, onion address, and everything else.
I mean, this is the problem with names like that is, there's no uniformity. And if you have a name that's decentralized like that, I mean, you're going to have varying levels of quality. Like literally what Alphabet did in Silk Road before it is they built a brand that people trusted. And that's the name of the game.
That's what I want. I want that. I want exactly the same thing. I just want it to be Alphabet instead of, like what or .onion or whatever it is. I just want to get rid of the weird part.
So you just think these things should be more accessible. I mean, that'll come in time, definitely, for everything, all this stuff. That's the thing I've always thought about Bitcoin and in general and all this cryptocurrency stuff is it's just going to take time to develop the layers of abstraction that are necessary for grandma to be able to use all this stuff. It's just like grandma couldn't send an email 20 years ago. Now you just give her an iPad and say, here you go, right?
All right, so
some grandparents.
I'm really wondering like what Reddit uses for its backend because every time you refresh the page, the amount of like hits, like upvotes it has changes.
It fuzzes them.
Does it do that on purpose so you can't scrape or something?
No, it does it to prevent bots from knowing if their vote counted or not.
Oh, okay.
It's vote fuzzing.
All right. Well, essentially, I got 7 upvotes. So you know how we were talking about Tezos last week? And I was like, hey, guys, how do y'all not know about this? Like, it's like a self-adjusting protocol or whatever. And, like, y'all looked at me sideways. I was like, all right, well, maybe I'm wrong. So I asked it on the Tezos Reddit. And essentially, it seems like you need an 80% majority to change the protocol. So I was asking, could you use the 80% quorum to change the X% vote quorum needed to change the protocol? And no one answered. So,
well, I mean, if it's one of those totally alterable ones, then yeah, I'm sure probably.
So, and then also someone said it was like some game of, I don't know. They compared it to some game that was also in the white paper. I know Junseth has talked about it, where you can change the rules of the game. One of the rules is you can change the rules. It's adjusting quorum. But anyway, so it looks like I wasn't full of shit completely.
Sounds like the game Kings or whatever. What's the drinking game where you get an ace and you can make up rules?
Anyways. I think that's just about it. I know we're kind of pushed for time. Paul, thank you so much for coming on.
Late, Paul.
Thanks for coming down to Atlanta today to be on the podcast again.
Yes, I'm happy to be here.
And Mike, I think the Knots has been
in Atlanta again. I'm very happy. And I just hope that everything goes well this week. Well, I guess we'll see you next week.
Yeah, you're flying back down next week, right?
Yes.
So, Mike, I think
who knows what color shirt I'll be asked to wear on that day. But with that, I bid you adieu.
Mike, I think the knots have been found.
Yeah, our blocks are forking.
Paul, you want to add something?
I don't know.
All right, we have to come up with a better tagline. There you go.
What do you say?
Difficulty has adjusted.
And the difficulty has adjusted. All right, thanks for propagating, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Later, Paul.
Yeah, Paul, thanks for coming on. We'll see you next week if you have time. And, I probably need to buy another shirt for Paul. Because I think those are my only two.
Yes.
Unless you wanna do dark that one shirt you had, the dark blue. We could make a joke. Hold on, let me stop the stream because I don't want people to know.